So I just want to give you a little quick rundown on my hardened steel bushings for the Hurst shifters. I did a video before on these and it really wasn't complete, so this is a revision of the video. It's got a little bit more detail about what these bushings are about. Check it out. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm going to take some pieces out of a Hurst kit so you could see how these bushings are helpful. A little stuff back. So I've got 3 bushings. This one here is the nylon bushing that is used in the Hurst shifters. This one is the pit pack bushing that is used as an aftermarket kind of upgrade bushing that you can get from Hurst. And this is my high impact tool steel hardened steel bushing. And let me explain the differences. If you notice that the pit pack bushing that Hurst sells has a smaller flange on it, that's because this is a sintered iron or powdered metal type bushing, and if you make flanges this big, they tend to crack. These bushings are very brittle. So what I did was I duplicated the nylon bushing, but out of high impact tool steel. So you can see that the diameter is the same of the flange, the thickness is the same. It's identical to the plastic bushing, only in hardened steel. Now, why that's important? If you look at some of the rod ends, the concentricity of the flange area is off. Let's see if you can get a better look at that over here. And this concentricity presents a problem when you're putting a plastic bushing on here because there's nothing for it to grab on this side. There's no holding area on this side over here of the bushing. So the plastic bushings are fine for normal use, but as you can see, they really don't grab that flange properly because it's offset. And it's plastic, so it's going to bend and eventually break. The sintered iron bushing that Hurst sells is a little bit better, but you can see it's off somewhat, again, from support. And it'll tend to eventually cock and crack. And this is a problem that we've been seeing with these bushings. So we realized that because Hurst rods are not exactly concentric over here, that we really needed a hardened support area for the bushing to lay against, so that when the shifter's on, it has better support and tends not to want to cock and move. So when you have an arm, for example, like this on here, it's not going to tend to want to go bend over this way. All right? Very important. Another thing is I'm going to assemble some of these right now so you can see also the difference in the springs. The springs that I sell are the ones on the left over here. These springs, they may appear a little thinner in diameter, but we needed to make the bend sharper because this spring doesn't even connect and pop into the rod correctly. This is, again, the spring that Hurst sells. It doesn't connect into the rod properly. It has a lot of issues with actually holding in place, and eventually it pops off. First thing I'm going to do is a strain test. Obviously, if I put this plastic bushing on this piece like this and just hit it, it's just going to mash. I mean, this is what happens. So on a high impact shift, the bushing is going to distort and break. If I take the powdered metal bushing, again, which is the one that's on the Hurst pit pack kits, and I put it on here, I'll lay it down. And again, this is just for purposes to show you how the impact resistance works with these bushings. They'll break very easy. This again is because they're made out of powdered metal. Very brittle. They may work for a bit, but eventually they crack and fall apart. Now if you put my bushing on here, because it's high impact tool steel, and I put it on, it's extremely durable. You know, let's watch that again. Nothing. It hasn't even bent. So you can see how durable these are. All right, so again, I'm going to put one of those powdered metal bushings on again, just to give an example. Just how these work. Again, you can see I really hit that bushing hard, by the way. It didn't even break. Okay, so again, I'm going to try not to let this scatter this time. There. That's an easy hit. You can see it breaks again in half. Again, let's go put that hardened bushing on there. Hit it again. So you can see, amazingly, not even a dent in the bushing. Pretty phenomenal, huh? Okay, so this is the popular Hurst Competition Plus shifter. We all love this shift. It's been around for ages. I've installed hundreds of these shifters easily. And here's the adjuster that goes on the shifter. This screws into the rod like this. In other words, we take the rod, we screw the adjuster in like this. That's how it works, all right? So my point here is that when we use these types of bushings that they have with the pit packs, they have a very small shoulder. you can see the bushing can actually get pounded out. It's so small against this hole over here, okay, compared to the size of the adjuster. So what you do is if you lay again their bushing on the adjuster, you can see the difference in the diameter of the bushing versus the adjuster. So when I put the hardened steel bushing against the adjuster, you can see that the flange of the bushing is fully supported by the adjuster diameter, as well as the adjuster is fully supported by the bushing. So when they're put into the shifter body, you get a much better support, much better fit. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is how these springs that Hurst sells fit into the rods and arms. We're going to use one of my bushings, we're going to put it on, and we're going to put the lever on in place. Now if I use one of the Hurst springs and I slide this in place here, it goes on fairly easy, but I want you to notice that it doesn't really grab the end of the rod. In other words, this spring is supposed to hook around. Part of the problem is they use a bigger diameter wire, and these wires tend to flatten out and move after a bit, so the rod will start to wiggle like this. So as these springs start to flatten, the rods tend to move and the linkage goes out of alignment. So the problem is these springs, they never really engage around the rod fully. And the same thing happens when they're on the adjuster. So I can kind of push this down as much as I can over here, and this doesn't go in all the way. And the problem is that allows the spring to just kind of pop off really easy like that. So what I did was I kind of made a spring that has a smaller wire diameter but a higher tension. So now you can see over here the way it grabs around the rod better and prevents itself from not popping off. Very important. And it's a lot more stable. But if I go like this, it is not really moving like the other spring does. It's a much more stable spring. So don't be fooled by the diameter, but because the diameter is bigger on this spring, it means that in fact that this spring is weaker. This basically has a spring wire that's got a higher tensile strength than this one does. So, and the other thing too is now, it's very hard for me to pop this spring off. It's not going to come off easy. I actually have to release it from the rod over here, which it's supposed to do, you see, for it to come off. And this is one of the reasons why I assemble a lot of shifters on transmissions. And one of the reasons why I developed these was because I hated for them to pop off. So now you know about the springs, and now you know about the bushings. All right, let's talk about shifter shafts and linkage arms. This is basically an issue with General Motors applications. Pretty much all other applications, I've always used one size shifter shaft. But for some reason, GM decided to use stud type and bolt-on style shifter shafts. It's very important to match the correct linkage arm with the correct shifter shaft. And by that I mean that the shifter shafts actually have a different drive slot. If you look at the drive slot on this arm, the right arm, it's bigger and has a little kind of cutout hole in it for the bolt to go through, where this one just has the rectangular slot for the stud. So when you put this on the stud type arm, like this, you can see it fits the slot perfectly. It doesn't wobble up and down. Don't forget, these shafts are a little bit worn. I'm using some used shafts. New ones are tighter, but it doesn't wobble around much. And you can see that the stud actually has flats in it that are cut so that it can go in the slot completely properly with exact fit. When you use the bolt-on shaft with the bolt-on arm, it's designed again to key with this type of arm, and you can see here that it has enough access for the bolt to go through and hold the arm. The problem is that sometimes people mismatch the arms and put the bolt-on style arm on the stud type shifter shaft. The width of the slot is the same, but these arms are longer. So when I put this on here, look at the amount of slop you have. So now, because we're working on a lot of custom cars and a lot of times we don't have the exact make and model transmission that the shifter came with, there are adapter clips that you can put in the arms. So these adapter clips do fit in the bolt-on style arms like this to take up the gap so that you can use them on stud type assemblies. So that's another little tip you should do if you're looking at a transmission. Make sure that the slots of the arms match the slots of the shifter shafts. So these little adapter clips I have, and I use them all the time because a lot of times people bring me in transmissions that don't fit well. In the same token, you obviously can't put this particular arm with the smaller slot on the shifter shaft that takes the bolt. It's not going to fit. So in that case, you're going to have to replace the arms or replace the shifter shafts. And it's obviously a lot easier to just replace the arms. So quick bushing lesson, spring lesson, shifter shaft lesson. I hope this little tutorial on the Hurst bushings and clips was somewhat helpful for you. I get a lot of questions on these every week. That's why I made this video. I wanted to upgrade a little bit about the springs. I wanted to show you the differences in the springs because I set up a lot of these shifters like every day sometimes. And I always ran into the same problem, so I decided to do something about it. Hopefully it'll help you out too. But I just got to show you something. You know, I have a lot of like equipment in the shop, a lot of like musical equipment. A lot of people have mentioned that before. But I got these mic stands, right? So I took this mic stand and I welded this bolt to it over here. And because the bolt is in this deep, it acts as a heat sink, so you can just tack weld it in place and not melt the arm. I tapped it for 1/4 20, so I could use it for that light, you see? So this is my little setup. This is what it looks like when I do these tutorials. No big thing, really is. But I just got so much stuff in the shop, I gotta use it somehow, right? Thanks for watching. See you next time.